Today we're going to be talking about how to use a third-party gateway with T-Mobile 5G home internet. And specifically we're going to be talking about the NEXPRO 5G gateway. Now this was sent over by Haven Technologies, so I want to give a big shout out to them. This was sent over free for review, so I just want to be perfectly clear that the review and the opinions in this video are completely mine and I'm not being paid to say anything. Now that we got that out of the way, the gateway is constructed of a full metal housing, and it's offered in two different firmware variants. So it's offered in a Mesh Plus and a WifiX. And now the Mesh Plus, it looks like this. And that is the stock firmware that comes on the gateway from the factory. Haven Technologies doesn't have anything to do with the making of that firmware or firmware updates or anything of the sort. Now they have their own variant of the firmware that they can load on this, which is called WifiX, and that looks like this. And it's based off of OpenWRT, and for those of you that don't know what that is, it's basically just open source firmware that anybody can take and they can modify and load onto various networking devices. But I will link the project down in the description below for anybody that's looking for additional information on that project itself. We'll get into both firmwares a little bit later in the video. As for the connections, this has dual band Wi-Fi 6, which is 802.11ax, and in the box you actually get the 4 Wi-Fi antennas. You're going to get 2 for 2.4 gigahertz and 2 for 5 gigahertz, as well as 4 cellular antennas. It offers 1 gigabit WAN Ethernet port, and that WAN port is convertible into a LAN port. You also get 2 gigabit LAN Ethernet ports, but if you were to convert that WAN port, that would give you 3 if you were to need that. Now the cellular antennas that we just discussed a second ago, they are removable because they are SMA connectors, and that is awesome because it allows for easy upgrades, whether you want to put a bigger antenna on here or a smaller antenna, or you have an external antenna. You can basically do whatever you need to do without having to take this gateway apart, and that is awesome. As far as network bands go, this thing has bands for days, both 5G and 4G LTE. As you can see here on the screen, I am not going to read every single one of these bands, but this thing should work no problem on T-Mobile, AT&T, or Verizon's 5G home internet services. As for the firmware I used in testing these products, because I did test both, I was on 2.2.2 for Mesh Plus, as well as November 13th, 2023 for WifiX. I did do most of my testing on the previous version of the WifiX firmware, but then they came out with an update as I was concluding my testing, and so I updated to that, and I went back through and made sure that any of the things that I said or did in the WifiX version still matched up and was true, and they did. Moving on from there, so let's take a look at each of the firmwares real quick, and we'll start off with Mesh Plus, and then after we're done with that, we'll move into the WifiX so that you can see the differences there. So this is what the Mesh Plus firmware looks like, and to get to it, you're going to go to islogin.com, and I'll throw that down in the description for everybody. Alternatively, you can also go to the router's IP address, which is 192.168.100.1, I believe, right out of the box. Out of the box, I don't believe there is a password set. Just make sure your username is admin, but I did set a password. Double check on the bottom of your gateway though. All the information you need should be on there. Once you log in, you will be greeted with a status screen of sorts. It will show your connected clients, how much bandwidth you're using, and then you get some information up here about your cellular data and system information that pertains particularly, or specifically rather, to the actual gateway. What I like about this is it's set up in the sense that it's like any other router. If you were to go to Best Buy and buy a third-party router, it doesn't matter the brand, you can go in and change a lot of the features by literally just clicking on something. If you want to change your DNS, like I put OpenDNS in here, you just punch it in and click save, and you're good to go. Same thing for changing your LAN. So I use 192.168.12.1 because I have network attached storage and some other things on my network that I don't want to have to reconfigure every single time that I'm testing a new product or gateway or network device. And so I always just make this mirror or match the T-Mobile home internet one. That way I'm not running into any kind of crazy issues with all my other devices. But again, you just punch it in and click save and you're good to go. You have a 5G info tab, which will show similar metrics to what was on the status screen. This offers band locking, and it's easy enough that you just select the bands that you want and then select save for both 4G and 5G.
And a lot of these, when you click save, the system will actually reboot in order for it to take effect, but it is simplistic enough that I think anybody could do it. And this is just a quick glimpse. Let's switch over to the WifiX now, and I'll show you similar functions on that firmware. For the WifiX firmware, you're going to go to the actual IP address of the gateway. So right out of the box, it's 192.168.1.1, but check the sticker on the bottom of your router just to make sure it hasn't changed between uploading this video and newer models coming out. But I've already changed mine, so you can see here I'm using 192.168.12.1, and we discussed previously why that was. But before we even log in, we're greeted with this nice live network status screen, and it gives you all of the information of your actual gateway. And it has built-in speed test, it shows your bandwidth use, and this is a really cool feature of this firmware specifically, because depending on what you're trying to do or configure or set up, you don't even have to log into the gateway to get to some of the information that would matter most to you, whether you're trying to set up an external antenna or you're trying to place your gateway in a better location so that you get a better download and upload speed or what have you. So to log into the router, you're just going to click router login here at the top. And then I've set a password up for mine, but I don't believe there's a password set out of the box. So once we get logged into the WifiX, you'll see that you're greeted with a similar status screen that you are on the Mesh Plus model, where you got your gateway information, your firmware's right here, and then it shows active clients that are connected, whether your Wi-Fi is on or not, and just different information that you have about your gateway. You do have a lot more features and customization in this firmware, and as you can see, it says Haven Technologies up here at the top. So they actually are able to provide updates to this because it's open source firmware. So anytime there's a problem or a bug or anything like that, Haven Technologies is able to step in and resolve a lot of the issues for their customers. Whereas with the Mesh Plus firmware, they don't have any control over that firmware at all. They're waiting for the manufacturer to send them that firmware update so that they can post that for their customers to upgrade all of their gateways to. It also means that bug fixes are slower on the Mesh Plus as opposed to the WifiX model because, again, Haven Technologies just doesn't have any control over that firmware. Now you will see you have a similar menu here on the left where you can go in and pick all of these different settings, and there's just way more stuff in here than there is in the Mesh Plus model. Way more customization, you have way more control over stuff, you're able to configure things that you can't even imagine configuring on the Mesh Plus model. But with that, you kind of have to know what you're doing, in the sense that I think the average user is not going to be able to pick up the WifiX model and just hit the ground running and configure it. And that's just my opinion. Everybody's knowledge levels are different, obviously. But if you're using this specifically for T-Mobile home internet, the configuration piece, you're going to be going in here to the modem area and you're going to miscellaneous, and it requires you to send AT commands. Now, thankfully, the support from Haven Technologies is phenomenal, and Richard specifically, he's the nicest dude you'll probably ever meet, hands down. And he helped me get my WifiX model set up because I didn't know a thing about AT commands. And any question I asked or message I sent, I got a quick response, and he was like, this is the command you need, this is how you do it. And he walked me through it. He sent me screenshots. I've sent him screenshots on certain things that I was trying to configure, and I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working properly. And 99% of the time it was just because I'm an idiot and I either couldn't read or I just overlooked something. But nonetheless, he was very kind and he was able to help me out and get this thing up and going. But if you're not familiar with AT commands, depending on your service provider, that is kind of a big deal, I think, for most people. Now, they do offer other resources. They have a Facebook community, they have an online forum, so you can reach out to those different platforms to try and get answers as well. And a lot of the stuff that you're probably going to ask are probably already posted in a thread on there, so you wouldn't necessarily need to reach out to Richard and wait for a response, or to Haven Technologies in general. This does have band locking just like the Mesh Plus model, so you'll see you can select the bands. I have this turned off on purpose, but you can just click select all and then click locked modem. I'm not going to click that because it will restart the modem, but that's how you would do it. Changing any of your other stuff, if you were to go to network and then interfaces, this is also what's different from Mesh Plus. So it lists all these different interfaces that are built into the actual gateway, and you will come over here to the right and select Edit. Under General Settings, this is where you would change your actual IP address. So from 192.168.1.1, this is where I changed it to 12.1 to mirror that T-Mobile home internet gateway. I like to use OpenDNS, so to change that, you would go to Advanced Settings and use Custom DNS Servers, and you just plug those in, and then you just click Save down here in the right-hand corner once you've changed all the settings you want to change within these tabs. So from that aspect, that's pretty straightforward. This LAN interface ordeal and clicking edit, that kind of threw me off when I first started using this because I've never worked with a network device that had things listed out like this. I think that's normal for most network devices that are utilizing the OpenWRT firmware, but I have never personally used anything that utilized that before. So I didn't realize that this is how you change some of the settings. But this is just a quick look on the two different firmwares. I don't think that one is necessarily better than the other. I would recommend the Mesh Plus firmware overall to people that don't have a lot of networking experience, but I wouldn't say that the Mesh Plus is necessarily a worse firmware, if that makes sense. The WifiX is going to be more for your techie people that want to do lots of changing and configurations and having way more control over their stuff. If you're more of a person that uses like an Eero mesh system like me, or you have an Apple device or something like that, where you just want to basically plug in some minimal settings and you just want it to work, the Mesh Plus is probably going to work out fine for you. Whereas if you have a lot of different networking stuff going on, you're probably going to prefer the WifiX model. This was just a quick comparison between the Mesh Plus and the WifiX firmware. It was by no means in depth at all. I just kind of wanted to brush the surface and show you guys some of the differences between the two. I am planning on making a more in-depth video for both firmwares, so if you're not subscribed, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss that video when it comes out. But now let's move on to something that I think everybody cares about, which is speed tests. So we're going to cover both the download and upload speeds as well as the ping on both the Mesh Plus and the WifiX models. Now please keep in mind these are just averages for both firmwares. On the Mesh Plus we had an average ping of 26 milliseconds with a download speed of 432 megabits per second with an upload speed of 39 megabits per second. Whereas on the WifiX we had 17 milliseconds for the ping, 205 megabits per second down, and 42 megabits per second up. Now it is worth mentioning the WifiX, because it's running the OpenWRT platform, it is currently limited to 350 megabits per second down. However, Haven Technologies is aware of this, and honestly 350 megabits per second down is probably good for most people unless you have a very large household. But if you do wish to have the faster speeds, you're going to have to give up all the configuration options and go with the Mesh Plus, because it does yield higher download and upload speeds overall. And this might not even matter because you might not be able to get speeds that fast, but I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned it for everybody.
And that's about all I have for this one. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit me up down in the comments if you guys have any questions about this gateway, or whether you're on the fence between choosing the Mesh Plus or the WifiX. I could probably help give a little bit of insight depending on your specific situation. Or maybe you already purchased this and you just want to give your opinion. Again, thank you to Haven Technologies for sending this out to us for review, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.